Yeah. Mount Pleasant Memorial Community Centre and Residents Association. Linda, welcome. Another very strong community representative, thank you.
Kia ora, councillors. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to this representation review today. If you don't know me, I'm Linda Rutland. I'm the paid earthquake recovery coordinator for Mount Pleasant for the community centre. Our president, Derek McCullough, would have liked being here today, but he's on a short bit of a holiday. Our association, just so you know, has got approximately 300 paying members, and we provide services through the community centre to a population of 4,000, and then communities outside that. So, for example, Brookhaven, which has no community centre or any such facility. My job description title is Earthquake Recovery Coordinator, as Mount Pleasant is still very much in recovery mode. We have many homes still requiring demolishing, hundreds needing rebuilding, and many people still in insurance dispute. We can see regeneration coming, but it's some time away for many of our residents. We would normally have done a better job of informing our residents about this really major change that's being proposed, but I'm sorry, our hands have been really full with rebuilding of the centre itself. So, yeah, I have got some supporters here though. So the background, the writers of the submission would like to acknowledge that the current council and community board representation over the last term has been excellent. We've never felt better represented than what we have been over this term, and that's both by community board members and by councillors. However, we've got three major concerns with the current proposal, which centres on effective representation of our communities of interest, fair representation of electors, and the need for change to an important boundary issue. In terms of the current proposal, the ratios for constituents generally across the city is improved, but for Banks Peninsula it's definitely a lot worse. And that's really because of geography and dispersed population, which I'm sure you're already quite familiar with. Well, the numbers of residents contained in Banks Peninsula ward is lower than other wards. The geographic area involved is very large and the population very highly dispersed. This arrangement would result in the sole councillor, like no other, having to travel very large distances to adequately represent his or her constituents. We believe it is important to recognise the impact of this travel time on the councillor's ability to work for his or her constituents. Complex issues, as well as much dispersed geography of Banks Peninsula, this area alone contains many complex issues, such as Littleton Harbour, the residents' relationship with the port company. The peninsula acts as a very important tourism gateway for the city. There are special relationships with Maori, with having 3 Maori Papa Tapu Runanga in the area. Recently, we've all discovered the news about the coastal hazard zones, and that's not going to go away, and our whole ward area is affected by that. And also because of the area containing the epicentre of the 22nd earthquake, the impacts in our wards, both our side of the hill and Banks Peninsula, have been very, very severe. And as I said, we've got lots of homes to rebuild still, lots of issues to come out when those things happen, such as arguments about retaining walls, water going on properly, broken pipes, that sort of thing. And then we can start looking at community assets. So the other thing that concerns is actually the structure of representation. You're proposing for Area 2 community boards instead of 1. So although we understand why that might be proposed, this actually adds additional demands onto that one Banks Peninsula councillor. So he or she will have 2 community boards to attend, unlike any other councillor. The thing that's really quite concerning is the unrepresentation this will give at council. Due to the proposed pairing of community boards around the city, every other board except Banks Peninsula Sumner will have 3 councillors sitting around their community board table, and they will be able to take forward and support those community board issues at the council. On the other hand, Banks Peninsula Sumner residents will not have this support and will only have 1 sole councillor taking forward issues for not 1 but 2 community boards. While there may be lower population numbers in Banks Peninsula Sumner than others, we submit that the above factors greatly outweigh the rather simplistic issue of just simple population. Our suggested solution to this problem is to provide for 2 councillor positions to represent the Banks Peninsula Sumner ward only. We're not talking about increasing councillors across the whole city. We strongly believe the circumstances justify 2 councillors for this ward, even if this remains so only until the next representation review. We understand that the legislation allows for this in special circumstances and that it's not a case of having to bump up councillors all over the city. We don't think the answer is to just increase community board representation, because the issue is when it gets to council, that's when you need the voice, and community board members can only do so much. If the request for 2 councillors is ignored, what is likely to result is a high level of dissatisfaction with the performance of the single councillor and a new councillor being elected every term. This would result in a continuous lack of understanding and knowledge of our local issues by the elected representative and inevitably poor decision making. Now, in terms of the boundary, the proposed boundary for the Sumner side of the ward finishes at the western end of the Ferrymead Bridge, which is very problematic for our suburb and those of Redcliffs and Sumner. This is in terms of our community of interest. The residents of Mount Pleasant feel that their community of interest is closely linked to that of our sister suburbs of Redcliffs and Sumner, but feel equally as strongly connected to the Ferrymead commercial area and the residential suburb of Brookhaven. The current proposal does not include the latter areas, but instead cuts Mount Pleasant off at the western side of Ferrymead Bridge. The Ferrymead commercial area has an important role for us. Mount Pleasant, being largely a dormitory suburb without its own village or shopping centre, is serviced by the Ferrymead commercial area. This area contains our supermarket, our post office, banks, hardware store, as well as numerous cafes and other amenities. For at least 2 decades, this particular commercial area has been formed part of our Residents Association area, recognised by the council. The future design and function of this area is of real interest to our residents and its closest neighbours along with Brookhaven. Can you imagine not including Littleton or Sumner shops in their ward boundary? This is what is proposed for our suburb. Roading. The majority of Mount Pleasant residents use the major arterials of Ferry Road and Humphreys Drive to travel to the city for work and education. These routes are vital lifelines to us, and what happens to them is of great concern and interest. It's important to us that the road and cycling corridors of Ferry Road and Humphreys Drive remain within our ward area. We need our councillors to have influence over these issues which pertain to these key roading corridors as they affect our daily lives. Conversely, people residing in Linwood Ward have no real interest in these roads as they look more to the west and north, not east. Additionally, we have a special affection for the Charlesworth Reserve. Many of our people go and tend that reserve and look after it and shared guardianship with Brookhaven, and this is demonstrated at attendance and planting days and maintenance of the reserve. As I've said before, the residents who live in Brookhaven have strong ties with Mount Pleasant and vice versa, as people leave the hill and go off and often retire to Brookhaven. Similarly, many young families living in Brookhaven choose to send their children to Mount Pleasant School rather than send them west to Woolston or Bamford. Brookhaven residents are currently included in the Mount Pleasant School zone. Given the above reasons, we believe it is logical to leave Mount Pleasant paired not simply with Redcliffs and Sumner, but the Brookhaven and Ferrymead commercial area. And we believe that, as in the past, Dyes Road acts as a very natural boundary. Now, another couple of little things. The ward name. We do not support the proposed name of the Littleton-Sumner ward. We are unhappy that as a suburb we're always subsumed under the name of Sumner. We're actually the largest community on the hillside, but always gets subsumed under Sumner, and sometimes that has quite big impacts, because during the earthquakes we didn't actually get any civil defence service at all. People just kept talking Redcliffe-Sumner, and we got completely missed. But that's not likely to happen again, but we're just bringing this to your attention. We would suggest that to be more inclusive and descriptive of the area, that the new ward, if it progresses, be named the Harbour Bays ward rather than Sumner Littleton. Community board name. In terms of the community board name, we submit that it should be changed to be more reflective of all geographical communities, and would suggest the name Estuary Hills or Port Hills Estuary. So in summary, we ask that the Council reconsider the way it has dealt with the coastal bays and Banks Peninsula area in this review, as the boundaries drawn for Mount Pleasant do not fit with our communities of interest. The proposal of one councillor for the Banks Peninsula Sumner ward does not provide for effective representation of our communities of interest, and it spectacularly fails in providing for fair representation for electors. Thanks very much.
Good. Andrew?
Thank you, Linda, for the submission. I'm just interested in a number of points you raised, because a part of the submission is in, obviously, the context of the Banks Peninsula Sumner Ward as proposed. And then you make some comments around your community of interest and how you look to Linwood Avenue and Ferry Road, you mentioned in particular. So how Mount Pleasant looks into the city rather than out onto the peninsula. So I'm almost taking the submission as two different things. One of which is, if we were to proceed with the proposed Banks Peninsula Sumner Ward, then you have some concerns about representation and how it's delivered. But you're also making some points around the community of interest that we've identified for Mount Pleasant and the boundaries. Would I be reading correctly into what you've said if I was to translate that into Mount Pleasant would be more appropriately paired as a community of interest with either the Woolston or Linwood proposed wards than the Banks Peninsula proposed ward? Is that a correct representation of what you're saying?
Well, really, we don't really have anything more to do with the Banks Peninsula area than any other part of the city. I mean, Heathcote has a close relationship with Littleton, but we don't particularly, and we really are focused where we travel in the large. I mean, we do recreate in Banks Peninsula, but so does everybody. And I think a lot of people have got ties with Woolston and elsewhere, but we wouldn't like to be severed from Redcliffe and Sumner either, because we share a lot of identity with them.
Yep. Yanni?
Thank you. One of the other issues that's come up from some submissions has been the grouping around community boards, and people have raised concern that Linwood would go to the north and that effectively what is the Hagley Ferrymead Community Board basically disappears and is subsumed by the other boards around it. So do you have any views around the ward pairings in terms of the community board constitutions?
I can't say that I've spent a lot of time looking at the pairings more out than at what's affecting us. I think Linwood's paired a bit oddly, and I think that needs looking at. Hagley Ferrymead's just always worked so well. It's just a shame it's having to go, but yeah.
Just sorry, just a further question in terms of Ferry Road seems to be a kind of connector in terms of the community board, basically from the central city to the
yes, definitely is.
So would you see that as being an important component of a spine of a community board?
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah. Ferry Road, if anything happens to Ferry Road, it just affects all those communities along that line. So, yeah, it's a very important part of the makeup.
We've had quite a long discussion this morning because of a range of submissions that obviously we read in advance about, the Banks Peninsula and whether we could take a view back to the Local Government Commission that there is a reason for having a discrepancy in the isolated community argument. It doesn't work when you include Littleton, but actually it doesn't make sense if you don't. So, there's some work that we're going to do on that, and we've asked staff to provide us with some options, including a fallback position, which might be slightly different from the one that is proposed. So. And we had quite a strong submission this morning on the Brookhaven community, which we see connects towards Ferrymead and Mount Pleasant rather than towards the city. So I think that point's been well made as well. So
that's good.
Yep. So thank you very much.
Okay.
Much appreciated. Are you on your own submission now? Or you don't want to present?
The previous submission from Kapiti, that was a group that we had, we got Jenny to come in and talk to that group, and following from that, some members wanted to make their own submission. Yeah. So we did that, and that was the submission, but that helped form the basis of our own submission. Right. So I don't think there's any real need to go through it.
Okay. Yeah. That's fine. Thank you very much. The next one is the Burwood East